Right now, pull your phone out of your pocket, or just picture it in your hand. You open your Maps app, you type in a coffee shop, and instantly the screen centers on a little blue dot. That dot is you. It tells you exactly where you are, which direction you are facing, and the exact path you need to take to get where you are going. If you take a wrong turn, a calm, polite voice recalculates your route in half a second. You do not even have to look up at the sky. You do not have to look at the trees. You just follow the glowing line. Sounds familiar, right? We have completely outsourced our sense of direction to a piece of glass and metal. But I want you to mentally put the phone away. Take off your watch. Strip away the roads, the street signs, the power lines, the trails. Picture this. You are standing in the middle of a massive, ancient forest, or on the edge of an endless, sweeping savanna. It is 50,000 years before right now. The wind is howling, the sun is beginning to dip below the horizon, and the shadows are growing long. You need to get back to your camp. It is 30 kilometers away. There is no trail. If you walk in the wrong direction, you will run out of water. If you walk in the wrong direction, the sun will go down, the temperature will drop, and the things that see better in the dark than you do will wake up. So, how do you find your way? And here is the strange part, the part nobody actually asks. We tend to think of ancient humans as just wandering around aimlessly, bumping into mountains and rivers by accident, hunting whatever crossed their path, and hoping for the best. But they were not. They were running vast, complex, intentional trade routes. They were crossing continents. They were navigating oceans. But there is one detail you have probably never noticed. They did all of this without a single drawn map, no compass, no astrolabe, no written language to leave instructions. And this is where it gets interesting. How did they know where they were? Not as in they looked at a mountain and walked toward it. Obviously landmarks exist. We are not talking about basic line-of-sight walking. We are talking about absolute spatial mastery. Holding a map of an entire continent inside a biological brain. Knowing exactly where you are in relation to things you cannot even see. What if we are wrong and ancient humans were just incredibly lucky wanderers who died by the millions in the wilderness? Or what if we are right, and there is a dormant, magnificent navigational machine sitting inside your skull right now, one that you have completely forgotten how to use because you handed the keys over to a satellite? Buckle up. This is the rabbit hole we are going down today. Let's start at the very beginning. What does it even mean to navigate without a map? Let's start with the most obvious thing. When we think of navigation without instruments, we immediately think of the stars. And yes, the night sky is the oldest map in existence. But I want to show you just how insanely precise this ancient science actually was. And to do that, we have to go to the most difficult, terrifying environment on planet Earth to navigate. The open ocean. Imagine you are sitting in a wooden canoe. You are in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Water covers roughly a third of the entire surface of the globe. There are no landmarks. There are no mountains to aim for. The horizon is a flat, unbroken line of blue in every single direction. It looks exactly the same to the north, the south, the east, and the west. You are trying to find an island that is maybe 10 kilometers wide, and it is located 4,000 kilometers away. Could you do it? If you miss it by a fraction of a degree, you will sail into the empty void of the ocean and die of thirst. For a long time, Western historians and anthropologists believed that the ancient Polynesians who populated the Pacific Islands must have done it by accident. They figured these people just got blown off course by storms, drifted aimlessly, and miraculously washed up on Hawaii or Easter Island. They literally could not fathom that ancient people could intentionally navigate thousands of miles of open, featureless ocean without a compass, a sextant, or a written chart. And that, in my view, is one of the most epically wrong and arrogant takes in the history of human thought. In 1976, a group of researchers and native Hawaiians wanted to prove that intentional voyaging was possible. They built a traditional double-hulled canoe called the hokulea. Their goal was to sail it from Hawaii to Tahiti over 4,000 kilometers of open ocean using absolutely zero modern instruments. No compass, no watch, no radio, no map. But they had a problem. The indigenous navigators of Hawaii had largely died out, and the knowledge had been lost. So they found a man named Mau Piailug. He was from a tiny atoll in Micronesia, and he was one of the last living master navigators who still knew the ancient way. Mau did not have a map. He was the map. He used a mental system called a star compass. He had memorized the exact rising and setting points of over 150 stars across the horizon. But you're about to say, come on, the stars are only visible at night, and what if it is cloudy? You cannot just look at stars. Okay, then explain this. Mau could navigate blindfolded. I'm serious. Mau could lie down inside the hull of the canoe, close his eyes, and tell you exactly which direction the boat was travelling, just by feeling the way the waves hit the wood beneath his back. He had learned to read the ocean's swell. An ocean swell is a deep, long wave generated by distant storms. It travels in a straight line for thousands of miles. Mau knew that when a swell hits an island, it reflects backward, creating a faint, microscopic bounce in the water. He could feel the difference between the primary wave and the echo of a wave bouncing off an island that was still 100 kilometers away, invisible over the horizon. He could read the flight paths of birds, knowing which species fly out to fish in the morning and return to land at night. He read the color of the clouds, knowing that a lagoon reflects a faint greenish tint onto the underside of the clouds above it. He navigated the Hokulea exactly to Tahiti without a single piece of modern technology. The Pacific Islanders had mapped the largest ocean on Earth using only their eyes, the hair on their skin, and an oral tradition passed down through generations. Sit with that for a second. While Europeans were terrified of falling off the edge of a flat Earth, ancient Polynesians were using the testicles of the ocean, feeling the deep, rhythmic roll of the waves to pinpoint a speck of sand thousands of miles away. But if you think that is strange, wait, it is about to get worse, because the ocean has waves and stars. What do you do when you are in a landscape that actively tries to erase its own features? So here is where the story takes a sharp turn. Let's leave the water and walk into the desert. The Australian outback is one of the most unforgiving environments on the planet. It is blindingly hot, relentlessly flat in many places, and water is so scarce that missing a waterhole by a kilometre is a death sentence. Indigenous Australians have survived here for over 60,000 years. Let that number land. 60,000 years. How do you build a map of a landscape that massive when you have no written language? You sing it. I want to introduce you to the concept of the song lines. To a Western mind, a song is entertainment. You put on headphones, you listen to a melody, you feel an emotion. But to the Aboriginal peoples of Australia, a song was a literal, functional blueprint for survival. A songline is a navigational track across the landscape. The song describes the journey of an ancestral creator spirit during a time called the dreaming. But embedded inside the lyrics of these ancient songs are precise step-by-step directions. Imagine you are an Aboriginal traveller setting out on a journey of 500 kilometres across the desert. You do not carry a map, you carry a song. As you walk, you sing. The tempo of the song matches the rhythm of your walking. The lyrics describe a red rock shaped like a lizard, then a dry riverbed, then a cluster of mulga trees. When you reach the red rock, the song tells you to turn toward the setting sun. When you reach the dry riverbed, the song tells you where to dig to find water beneath the sand. Dr. Lynn Kelly, a researcher who studies ancient memory systems, found that these songs are incredibly sophisticated mnemonic devices. Our brains are absolutely terrible at remembering abstract data. If I give you a list of GPS coordinates, you will forget them in 10 seconds. But our brains are brilliantly, flawlessly evolved to remember spatial locations attached to stories and music. You probably still remember the lyrics to a song you have not heard since you were 12 years old, right? The Aboriginal elders harnessed that exact neurological quirk to encode survival data. The entire continent of Australia was covered in an invisible web of these songlines. They crossed tribal boundaries, and they crossed different languages. A person could walk into a territory where they did not even speak the local language, but because they knew the melody and the rhythm of the songline, they could still follow the geographical markers. The melody itself translated into the physical shape of the earth. They did not just live in the landscape was a library, and they were walking through the pages, reading it out loud. And you are probably thinking, okay, that is a brilliant cultural invention, that is heavy memorization, but it is still just learning landmarks. Surely, without a landmark, the human brain is blind, right? Okay, that is settled. Now forget everything I just said. Let's look inside your own head. Because in 2014, a group of neuroscientists won the Nobel Prize for discovering something that sounds like absolute science fiction. For decades, scientists debated whether humans had an innate sense of direction, or if we were just good at looking around and remembering what we saw. The honest answer is, for a long time, we really did not know. Then, researchers like John O'Keefe and later Maybrit and Edvard Moser started putting electrodes into the brains of rats and letting them run around in little boxes. They were looking at a part of the brain called the entorhinal cortex, which is situated right next to the hippocampus, the memory center. What they found completely blew the doors off our understanding of navigation. They discovered place cells. When a rat walks into a specific corner of a room, a specific neuron in its brain fires. It is like the brain drops a pin on a digital map. I am here. But the real mindbender was the grid cells. As the rat moved through an empty space, the Mosers noticed that certain neurons fired in a very specific repeating pattern. When they mapped out exactly where the rat was standing every time those neurons fired, the pattern emerged. It was a perfect overlapping grid of hexagons. Hexagons, like a honeycomb. Your brain, right now, as you sit there listening to this, is actively projecting a virtual geometric grid over the physical space around you. You cannot see it, you cannot feel it, but your brain is laying down an invisible coordinate system of interlocking hexagons onto your living room, your street, your city. When you walk to the kitchen to get a glass of water in the dark without bumping into the doorframe, it is because your grid cells are quietly tracking your velocity and direction, calculating your exact position on that internal honeycomb, and updating your coordinates in real time. It is a process called path integration. You have a literal GPS satellite system built out of raw meat and electricity sitting right behind your eyes. Yes, exactly that. You do not just learn maps, you generate them. But if we have this magnificent internal coordinate system, what happens when there is absolutely nothing to anchor it to? Let me throw you something even wilder. We are going from the burning desert of Australia to the freezing, brutal whiteout of the Arctic. The Inuit people of the polar regions have historically navigated one of the most featureless environments on Earth. Imagine walking out of your house and the sky is a flat, milky white. The ground is a flat, milky white. There is no horizon line. There are no trees. There are no rocks. Everything is blinding snow. You have to travel 40 kilometers to hunt seals, and then you have to find your way back to a tiny cluster of igloos that are completely camouflaged against the white background. How do you do it? You learn to read the invisible. The Inuit relied heavily on wind patterns. But wind is invisible, so how do you see it? You look down at the snow. The wind carves the surface of the ice into hard, sharp ridges called sastrugi. These ridges always point in the direction of the prevailing wind. If you know that the winter wind always blows from the northeast, you can use the direction of the snow ridges as a permanent physical compass needle carved into the ground. But it gets better. They read the sky to see the ground. In a whiteout, water and ice reflect light differently. Open water absorbs light, making the clouds directly above it look slightly darker. Ice reflects light, making the clouds above it brighter. This is called water sky and ice blink. An Inuit hunter could look up at a completely overcast sky and know that 10 kilometers ahead there was a crack in the ice, just by the microscopic difference in the shading of the clouds. They were navigating by looking at the mirror reflection of a landscape they could not even see yet. And we are getting closer to the answer to our question, but it turns out to be nothing like what you expected. Because no matter how brilliant the Inuit, the Aboriginal Australians, and the Polynesians were, they were all using environmental clues: stars, waves, snow, songs. But what if you take all the clues away? What if you put a human in absolute darkness? Do we have a biological compass? Birds have it. Sea turtles have it. Pigeons can be driven hundreds of miles away in a dark box, released, and they will fly straight home. They have a sense called magnetoreception. They can literally feel the magnetic field of the Earth. For years, scientists said humans do not have this. We lost it, or we never had it. But in 2019, a geophysicist named Joseph Kirschvink at Caltech decided to test it. He built a Faraday cage, a completely dark, electromagnetically isolated room. He put human volunteers inside, sat them in the pitch black, and hooked them up to EEG machines to read their brainwaves. Then, he artificially rotated a magnetic field around their heads, exactly matching the strength of the Earth's magnetic field. The volunteers felt nothing. They saw nothing. They had no idea the magnetic field was shifting. But their brains knew. When the magnetic field shifted, the alpha waves in the volunteers' brains plummeted. In neuroscience, a drop in alpha waves means the brain is actively processing sensory information. Even though the conscious mind felt absolutely nothing, the subconscious brain was registering the change in magnetic north. Scientists still argue about what this means. We do not fully understand the mechanism yet, but the data suggests that deep down, in the oldest, darkest, most primitive basement of the human brain, there might be a compass needle spinning in the dark, still trying to point us home. And honestly, this one breaks my brain. You might have a magnetic sensor inside you right now, completely drowned out by the noise of modern life. But here is the part we do not like to talk about. And now I have to tell you the other side of this. And this is where it stops being a fun collection of ancient superpowers. We love to romanticize the ancient navigator. We love the image of the solitary hunter standing on a cliff, reading the wind, perfectly in tune with nature, fearless and free. It looks great on a motivational poster, but here is the thing nobody puts on the cute infographic. Why did we evolve these insanely complex systems? Why did our brains dedicate billions of neurons to place cells, grid cells, and magnetic sensors? Why did we invent songlines and star compasses? Because the alternative was a horror we can barely comprehend today. Today, getting lost is an inconvenience. Your phone dies, you take a wrong turn, you feel a little flash of anxiety, you ask for directions, you eventually find your way back to your car. You might be late for dinner. In the Pleistocene epoch, getting lost was a death sentence. Sit with that for a moment. Slow down and really imagine it. You are entirely alone. The sun drops below the horizon. The temperature plummets. You do not have a flashlight. You do not have a lighter. The darkness is not the gentle darkness of a modern city park with ambient streetlights glowing in the distance. It is absolute, crushing, impenetrable blackness. And in that blackness, there are things that weigh 600 kilograms, that can see perfectly in the dark, and that view you not as the apex predator of the planet, but as slow, weak, soft-fleshed prey. Psychologists study a phenomenon called woods shock. It is what happens to modern people when they get genuinely lost in the deep wilderness. Within hours, the cognitive map shatters. The brain realizes it has lost its tether to the known world. The adrenal glands dump a massive spike of cortisol into the bloodstream. Heart rate skyrockets. Panic sets in. Rational thought completely shuts down. People who are lost in the woods often do completely irrational things. They drop their backpacks. They shed their clothing. They run blindly until they collapse. Your body reacts to being lost with the exact same physiological terror as it reacts to being chased by a bear. Why? Because for hundreds of thousands of years, spatial disorientation meant you were separated from the tribe. A human being alone in the wild is one of the most pathetic creatures on Earth. We do not have thick fur. We do not have fangs. We do not have venom. We do not run particularly fast. Our only evolutionary advantage, The only reason we survived the ice ages and the saber-toothed cats is the collective, the group. If you lost the path, you lost the group. If you lost the group, you lost the fire. You lost the extra sets of eyes to watch for predators while you slept. You lost the hunters who would share meat with you if you failed to catch anything. In ancient times, the worst punishment you could inflict on a person was not physical torture, it was banishment, exile. To be cast out of the tribe and told to walk into the wilderness alone was universally understood as a delayed execution. We did not learn to navigate just because we were curious explorers who wanted to see what was over the next hill. We learned to navigate because we were absolutely terrified of dying alone in the dark. Every star compass, every songline, every grid cell in your brain is built on a foundation of millions of years of evolutionary trauma. The ones who did not pay attention, the ones who could not memorize the path, the ones whose grid cells failed them, they walked out into the tall grass and they never came back. They did not become our ancestors. We are the descendants of the terrified, brilliant ones who looked at the stars and said, "I have to remember this, or I am going to die." And that changes how we look at everything, doesn't it? Because when you put it all together, the Polynesian wave riders, the Australian singers, the Inuit snow readers, the hexagonal grids firing in your brain, and the crushing evolutionary terror of the dark, it paints a picture of humanity that is so deeply moving, it almost hurts. We did not conquer the world because we were tough. We conquered it because we paid attention. Our greatest survival tool was not a spear, it was our connection to the world and to each other. When an Aboriginal elder sang a songline, they were not just reciting an itinerary, they were participating in a massive, living, communal internet of knowledge. A map that only existed when people sang it to each other. A map that lived in the breath and the memory of the collective. The honest truth is, we don't know exactly what it felt like to be a human 50,000 years ago. Science can describe the grid cells, but it cannot crawl inside the experience itself. But we do know this. To navigate the ancient world, you could not look down. You had to look up. You had to feel the wind on your face. You had to know the names of the stars. You had to understand the language of the birds and the shape of the waves. You had to be so intimately, completely entwined with the environment that the boundary between where you ended and the landscape began almost disappeared. The map was not something you held in your hand. The map was the world itself. And that is sad and beautiful at the same time, because we have traded that profound, total connection for absolute convenience. We traded the stars for satellites. We traded the songlines for a glowing screen. We no longer have to memorize the shape of the world because the world has been mapped for us. We are safer than we have ever been. You will probably never die of exposure because you took a wrong turn in the forest. But we have also never been more disconnected from the physical reality of the planet we are standing on. We don't know what awaits us in the future. We are building artificial intelligence that will probably soon navigate our cars and our lives for us completely. But the very fact that we sit here today, the descendants of frightened primates who looked up at the terrifying endless night sky and figured out how to draw a map across the stars so they could find their way back to a warm fire, that is one of the most astonishing things in the known universe. Right now, look at your phone again. The screen is off. It is just a piece of glass. In a moment, you will put it back in your pocket. You might walk out of your house, get in your car, and pull up that little glowing blue dot to tell you how to get to the grocery store. It is the same phone, the same dot. But now you know what is behind it. You know about the grid cells silently firing in a hexagonal dance inside your skull. You know about the dormant magnetic compass buried deep in your biology. You know that somewhere inside you is the echo of a people who could read the ocean by touch and map the desert by song. You are never truly lost anymore. But maybe, just for today, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to put the phone in your pocket, look up at the sky, and try to find your own way home. If you have ever gotten genuinely, completely lost, in a city, in a forest, anywhere, tell me about it in the comments. What did it feel like in that exact moment when you realized you didn't know where you were? I read these, and I want to know if that ancient evolutionary panic still echoes in you. And if you like looking at the ordinary world and realizing it is 100 times wider, older, and stranger than it seems, hit subscribe. We have a lot more rabbit holes to go down together. I'll see you in the next one.